And now we come to settling a debate about kids being forced to hug their grandparents. This thread actually starts from a really interesting place, which is probably not where I would have started this from, but it's quite an interesting point for other people who would see the same pattern. So today I saw a post on social media regarding how millennials grew up as a generation being held responsible for their parents and others' emotions, and thus they have a higher rate of depression and anxiety. Now, I'm not sure if there's actual studies to back this up, but I do see some truth to it. Anyways, this sparked a heated debate with my husband on how we raise our little one. LO is short for little one. Basically, what I said was that I don't want him to grow up thinking that he needs to put himself in uncomfortable positions to make others happy. He needs to be respectful and should take others' emotions into account, but he shouldn't sacrifice his own mental well-being just to make others happy. I then gave the example of the last time my mother-in-law came. She asked him for a hug, and he said no and walked away. My mother-in-law proceeded to fake sob and say that he made her sad because she wanted a hug, and continued asking him for a hug and crying until he gave her one. They were leaving soon, so I bit my tongue, but I really don't agree with this type of manipulation and will say something next time. DH, her husband, said that we need to teach him to be respectful, and part of that entails hugging people. Maybe not friends, but at least parents and grandparents. I disagree. If he's not comfortable or doesn't want to give hugs goodbye, he can still be respectful and say goodbye in a manner that doesn't compromise his comfort. He thinks a child should be made to give hugs to family regardless of whether they want to, because it's polite. I disagree. What are your thoughts? This is actually a really interesting debate, because I think that the answer is quite clear. And I don't know if this comes from the whole millennial generation thing. Maybe some aspect of it does. But I do think that that's probably more to do with previous generations being a little bit more authoritarian in terms of how children were raised. And the perspective that kids are kind of like they're owned by their parents. So they're not separate individual human beings who have their own desires, wishes, boundaries, physical space. I think that this is probably a new way of interacting with children and seeing it. However, irrespective of all of that, the way that her mother-in-law in this situation went about this is kind of gross. There's something a little bit, it's emotional blackmail, essentially, is what it comes down to. And you can imagine if she were trying to convince the child to do anything else under the same circumstances, or this idea of like forcing physical affection on a child by fake sobbing and trying to blackmail him into it by making him feel bad for you is really not good. And I'm a little bit shocked that her husband in this situation says, no, we need to teach the child to be respectful. There is some aspect of this, and a lot of people in the comments actually go into this in terms of bodily autonomy, not forcing your kids to give hugs to anyone, sexual assault, and where the boundaries, like how are kids taught to stay quiet when their physical boundaries are being overstepped. And part of that comes from the same kind of aspect of, hey, as a child, you don't have the right to say no. When you don't want to hug someone, if you don't want to kiss someone, whether it's your parents, your grandparents, their friends, your aunts, uncles, etc. It doesn't matter who it is. But as a child, if you have the right to say no, and parents should encourage that in their kids and should teach them that boundary in their kids as well.